Sabrosura pa' ti que
Hello, everyone. This is Pam, the Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that features Latine and people of the global majority who break barriers, change lives, and make the world a better place. Welcome to episode 381 of Café con Pam. Today, we have a conversation with Sylvia Banderas Coffinet. Sylvia is a distinguished Latina marketplace expert and C-suite executive with nearly 2 decades in media strategy and multicultural marketing. Renowned for her visionary approach and thought leadership, Sylvia has launched some of the most influential Latina media franchises and collaborated with top brands like Ford, Delta, and Procter & Gamble. Generating over $500 million in revenue, a Forbes trailblazing Latina executive in media, she is passionate about amplifying Latina voices and championing diversity in media. Sylvia holds a BA from Columbia University in Latinx Studies, a Stanford Publishing Course certificate, and a DEI certification from Cornell University. Listeners, this conversation with Sylvia, first of all, Sylvia is one of my favorite people. I have met, I would say at this point, hundreds of executives in the media space just because of my line of work, just because conferences, and not just within Café con Pan, but just like period. And I can confidently say that Sylvia is one of the probably 2 people that I've come across that actually cares. And not that other people don't. I'm trying to be careful saying this. It's not that other people don't, but when they say, remember where you come from, I think Sylvia truly embodies that. And no matter what level of life she's in, she truly remembers and cares about nuestra gente. And she truly, I think, and I don't know, maybe that's something that I can ask her. I don't know if it doesn't seem like work, it doesn't seem like it's a conscious act to be constantly bringing yourself back to where you come from. I think it's within her, and she truly cares. And every time I've seen her or we've run into each other without knowing that we were going to be at the same place, she's the same person. And that's why when she reached out and said, could we do another episode? I was like, absolutely. And so this time around, this is an unusual type of episode. We are going to talk about voting and the importance of it. And those of us who can, why we must, and those of us who cannot, why we must also stay informed, because maybe there's some privileges that we may not have access to, and we also could influence others that could. Bueno, I'm not going to elongate this intro any longer. Sin más, here's my conversation with Sylvia Banderas.
Sabrosura pa' ti que
Well, Sylvia, welcome back to Café con Pam. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pam. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. It's like such a full circle moment for us, because I think I was one of your first guests, and now you're celebrating 8 years.
Yeah, you were like episode 50 something.
Yeah, and then incredible. You've been doing this for 8 years before it was a thing, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And I just personally want to say, I'm so grateful for you, because you have really been at the forefront of telling stories that otherwise just wouldn't get told. And that is a personal mission of mine. It's something that really resonates with like my higher purpose. And so I sincerely thank you.
Thank you for recognizing it and seeing it, because it's been work.
Of
But
course.
here we are for the cause.
For the En la lucha, hermana, en la lucha.
En la lucha seguimos, en la lucha. And yes, 8 years and counting. Let's see where this goes.
Sí.
It's been definitely an evolution. And I tell people, when people I from time to time I get DMs like, "Oh, I just discovered you." And I'm like, "Well, start from the top because if you start from the bottom, I'm a very different person
Oh,
than I
wow.
was like 8 years ago because we grow and evolve."
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point. That's the goal.
Yeah. So, just to give a quick recap to the listeners, you were here like way back when, episode 53.
Oh, mira. Yeah.
So, this means that you were like barely year 2 of Cafe Compa.
See.
Like we were babies. And for you, like at this point people have already heard your bio, but you've also evolved.
Hmm.
And now we are going to focus a lot on voting because that's
Yeah.
the main thing that needs to happen. But just give us like a quick, like 1 second where you were and where you are now and what's important to you at the moment.
Where I was honestly just telling stories that would otherwise not get told. Like my mission in life has always been to tell the stories of the vulnerable so that we can open hearts and minds and build a society that is more equitable, more tolerant, and therefore evolve together. I think that's what I've always been about. That hasn't changed. But I think right now I'm feeling the urgency of reminding everyone that like this isn't the time to be a one issue voter. This isn't the time to sit out. Like you can be disappointed in both parties and so am I, but we must stand together against hate speech because we are at a critical point in our democracy and your vote matters. um I mean every election matters, but this one this one is critical. I cannot underscore how critical, and we cannot take our democracy for granted. And so I'm here today to tell you a little bit more about my story and connect that to the recent conversations around hate speech in Project 2025 and explain to, our gente that we must vote and do the right thing not only for ourselves, but for the most vulnerable amongst us. It is our right, it is our duty. Y si se puede, y se tiene que hacer. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's the time. Let's go. We got to stand up to hate together because words matter. Hate speech, like calling people all of a sudden, it's okay to call people illegal again. Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
That dehumanizes communities, it criminalizes children. Language, and I want to say this like with real emphasis, language shapes public perception
Yeah.
and policy and laws and morality don't always go well together. There are a lot of laws that are immoral.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I am. This is where we are.
So one thing I love about you is that you've been able to kind of like scale the ranks in the corporate world. And even then, people may look from the outside looking in, pues ella ya llegó, like she's successful. But you still have never forgotten about the gente, about the people, and about where you came from. And I think this passion that you show us really reflects that you're still in the lucha because you've also experienced
Yes,
consequences.
absolutely.
Let's talk about Proposition 187.
Growing up undocumented, I mean, I still sometimes I think about my life and it feels like I'm watching a movie that it almost feels like I'm above myself watching this life. And I cannot believe my journey because I've been at the White House and I grew up selling burritos in a garage in mechanic garages around East LA or car washes. And then I ended up working at Town and Country and having high tea, and I had high tea with like one of the most prominent families in Spain. And at the same time I go back home and my grandpa still doesn't speak English correctly, and he used to be a farm worker. So for me, my roots run deep, and I really personally understand, the lasting trauma of hate speech.
Mm.
And look, it's not just political, right? For me, it's personal because of how I grew up. Having my father, I remember the look in my father's eyes, and I wrote about this.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw him go from somebody that used to have self-respect to someone that looked like a scared dog in front of an alpha, completely resigned and embarrassed and like not having any sense of worth, and watching that break down before me, and the impact that that had on our family, the impact that had on him, the impact that had on our community and social circle. And like all these things reverberate. It's not,
Siloed in one person.
we're all connected. This is
Mm-hmm.
all like all of us come here to live this joint experience. We're all souls in a body, and everything we do to one another at some point, and any crime we commit against any other person is a crime against our own humanity, and we just don't get it.
Yes.
We just don't see it yet. But if we could imagine a world where we did see it, we did understand that human dignity is our birthright, that there's no such thing that, I respect borders, I understand them, but they're also artificial. And a lot of times when we talk about immigration in a political sense, we're scapegoating, we're
Yes.
avoiding real issues because it's so much easier to create an other and demonize people and demonize the most vulnerable among us. Um, and so, I think about this a lot, and I also process just how disrespected we are as a community in the United States. And that
Mm-hmm.
really bothers me because the Latine community has deep, deep historical roots. These are our ancestral lands.
Yeah.
A lot of people forget that there was no North America and South America. This
Yeah.
was, we were here before this country was even founded. Many of us have
Mm-hmm.
claims to these lands that date the existence of the United States of America. And I love this country. That's why I'm here today. That's why I'm having this conversation today. But one of the things that I find so incredibly disheartening is how little we talk about the contributions of Latinos,
Mm-hmm.
of our people.
Daily.
I mean, girl, like, okay, our contributions to the culture, to the economy are immeasurable. Undocumented immigrants generate so much revitalization and essentially business, right? So they contribute something like, you can fact check me, but I know I'm right about this, something like $97 billion annually in taxes.
Yeah. Which is a lie that people, it's a myth that lots of people talk about. Like the tax conversation.
That's not true. They contribute to the economy, they pay taxes, and in fact, we as citizens benefit from this because in fact, Social Security and Medicare programs, they don't get access to these benefits. Um, and they are also, I think, one of the most important points for me because my grandfather was a farm worker, and I think I grew up in California. Um, Undocumented immigrants are the backbone of our entire food system. ¿Y quién no come? ¿Quién no come?
It's like,
They are the backbone of the entire food system. Undocumented immigrants make up something like, and I think I'm being super conservative right now, like 50% of the workers. Literally, they feed us. Es
yeah.
que cuando digo malagradecido, ¿cómo me duele? Porque I feel like we literally have built our entire food system on their backs.
Mm-hmm.
And they are essential to the production of fruits and vegetables and crops. We eat because of them. We don't talk about this enough, and they are some of the most abused. And a lot of times when I think about the reality of why there hasn't been a path to citizenship, there's a part of me that really does believe that economically, cheap labor is a priority.
Profits over people.
Y la verdad is, like, when is it going to be time? When is our generation going to say, ya basta, this is not okay? Like, and that's why I think voting right now makes a big difference, because it's the time, like, your vote matters, and especially in certain states, right? But I think we don't talk enough about our contributions as Latinos. We don't have narratives around the reality of who's driving economic and demographic growth. We're growing at a rate of 6 times the non-Latino. We contribute trillions of dollars, something like $3.4 trillion is our economic power as Latinos. The fifth largest global economy right here within our borders. Like, come on. And yet, like, how is this man standing before our fellow citizens and letting those vile, untrue, because let's just be real, there's like no tether, he's completely untethered from reality and truth, like, it's just what it is. But my point is, and I'm saying too much here, but I really think it's time that we all go out of our way to talk about our contributions, to build more collective pride, and to stand in our in our successes, in everything that we bring to this country, because this country is great because it
We
literally
are.
eats. Yes. And as we go, so will this country.
Right. Oof, you said so much. Let's like peel it. Let's peel the layers. So first, I as you're talking, I remember a story I heard from an elder that said lies have wings.
Mm.
So they fly and they get to places really fast. The truth has feet. And so it takes a little bit longer to arrive, but it will arrive. It just takes a little longer. And it's one of the most profound ways
Mm.
to see things. And as you're talking and saying how like unhinged the conversation is about so many topics, not just immigration, but like so many things.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those that we need to kind of like get back, o sea, aterrizar en la tierra, like
See.
get back to the ground and go find that truth, because lies have wings, so they fly. Like, I mean, mama,
See.
he says some shit like literal. Todo mundo like believes it. Like the Haitians eating dogs and like what?
I mean, that's a perfect example. And like, seriously, if you hear his last speeches, he's like talking for 80% all over the place about, people eating dogs, and um what was he was talking about, Silence of the Lambs, like, what, like, it doesn't even make sense what it's insane. But again, I feel that because he has no substance, he has to weaponize fear. He has to essentially rely on lies and hate speech and sensationalizing whatever it is he possibly can,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a very effective tactic. And I think he knows, because he's seen these playbooks. These are like old, tried and true playbooks, everything from, what happened in Germany to the way that we're looking at this now. Immigrants have been I would say, at the center of the scapegoating and like creating another so they can blame the crisis on the most vulnerable people in the population and get away with it, right? It's so sad. And I think that today's climate has taken that to a whole nother level. And one of the craziest things for me is I often question like why people have such short-term memories. Like why can't they do they know that like just paying a little bit more attention to history, just how history can repeat itself and what it can do. I mean, he's talking about things like putting people in camps. He's talking about deporting American citizens.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time processing that anyone would have a question mark.
I see.
Es como, es increíble. Es como, I hate to say it, but like cockroaches for raid. Es algo que me da mucho dolor. And it's a lot of like internalized self-hate, I think. And so you push, I'm not that. I'm not that. We're all that, all of us. Whether it doesn't even matter if you're, not Latino. This is a human issue. Immigration is a human right. And there's only like the difference between a refugee and you could be one storm. Look at what's happening right now. It's luck. It's literally luck. And it's crazy because the majority of the same people that are so anti-immigrant all have immigrant roots.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And
yes.
they're being, I mean, pobrecitos. I don't wish anybody else, but Dios mío, like, wake up.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I think about often. But before we go there, because I have a story about that. I also, as you were talking earlier, I thought about the victimization that we put on ourselves, Latinos.
También.
We do. Like,
Sí.
for example, we're still in Hispanic Heritage Month, right? So the conversation has been, and like I've totally like participated in this conversation, so I'm not excluding myself. Of like, oh, nobody did anything for Hispanic Heritage Month, and like blah blah blah, and so and it's this like, I was like nobody came to save us, but you just talked about how we would be together, combined with our buying power, the fifth largest economy.
That's right.
And so I often think about that and how, like, es bien fácil decir, pues nobody looks at us, nobody like whatever. But like, frankly, I mean, nobody's looking at me. I've reached out to so many brands to work with me. One said yes. And I built my stage. And on Sunday, I'm going to stand on my stage because nobody gave it to me. And we're going to make it happen because I can, you know? And so I think that power that we have,
Yeah.
instead of crying about nobody looking at us, is what can we do? How can we stand on it and take action into it?
1000%. And I hear you on that. And I think that is where the younger generations, I feel like, are a lot more awake to it than we are. And it brings us back to the whole the whole point of this conversation today, which is the power of your vote. Voting is the most powerful tool to fight against hate speech, right? So like just that alone, I think there's something to be said about internalizing sovereignty and power when you haven't had it and when you haven't been taught that. It's almost like you have to reawaken to it. You have to remember. And a lot of times you have to be reminded.
And when you haven't seen it, it's hard.
Exactly. Because it hasn't been modeled. Think about the way many of us have grown up and the things that we would hear, right? As like cultural norms around power. And look, every vote right now it can help us stand against the normalization of hate speech, and it's a chance to elect leaders who respect and protect our communities. So let's just start there, right? And I have so much to say about the business imperative because I've lived it. I've been in the media industry in that game for 20 years, and I was one of the, when the first census in 2010 came out and everybody was awakened to it, and it was like the first time people really got the power of the purse. But I also, there's a part of me that's like exhausted by this conversation because it's almost like, are we seriously still having to defend our economic power? Are we serious? But the truth is, yes. And so I think the important thing is the mindset of, let's not complain about it. Let's do something. Let's take action. So vote. Number one, vote.
Yeah, it's really important. So something interesting as you're talking, 100%, when you haven't had the modeling, it's really hard to stand on that truth because, the truth has feet. So maybe that truth hasn't arrived yet. However, according to Pew Research Center, primero que nada, 36.2 million Latinos, Hispanics, etc., are eligible to vote this year. In 2020, comparatively, we were 32.3 million. So we went from 32% to, 32 million to 36 million. So lots of people gained that buying, not that buying power, but also that voting power. A lot, whatever number of millions. I'm not doing the math. And so, which means we're growing.
Yeah.
And Latinos are projected to account for 14.7% of all eligible voters in November.
Yeah.
So just because we can, doesn't mean we will.
Exactly. And that's the scary part, right? Because young Latinos in particular, the ones that are coming to the table new, the ones that can actually make the difference.
Yeah.
Especially in swing states, right? Like Arizona, Nevada. They can tip the scales. And it's so sad when I think about how close this election is. Like I have a hard time processing that. But our generation has the numbers to reshape the political landscape.
We do.
Now we just have to mobilize. Now we just have to care. And I think that part of the problem that we're seeing is, like you said, because we have this mentality of like, pues,
¿qué diferencia va a ser?
¿Qué diferencia va a ser? O, pues, no sé, como que la verdad no me gusta ninguno de los dos. O yo no me meto en ese rollo. Puras buenas. No. Like, these things have consequences and they're very real.
Yeah.
Our families, nuestras familias, nuestra gente is enduring discrimination, fear-mongering, and that will create instability for the younger generations.
Yeah.
Así de fácil. Voting is how we honor the sacrifices of our ancestors and the people that have come before us that didn't have that right.
Right.
Y si todos pensamos así, nos vamos a quedar en la misma siempre.
Vamos a seguir así.
Exactly. Like, old ways are not going to open new doors. Y tenemos que verlo clarito. Like, clarito. This is our time. And if we don't take our power and realize that we are not victims, but in fact, we are the future of the economic and demographic growth for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
I mean, things can change after that, but right now, for the next 40 years, unless there is a massive demographic shift because of something unforeseen, I don't know, something crazy, like a nuclear war. So, we are it.
Yep.
God forbid. Pero el punto es, no one's going to come to rescue us. Ya basta con esa mentalidad. Es hora de aterrizar, como tú dijiste, y es hora de ponernos las pilas y darnos cuenta que tenemos la responsabilidad, tenemos el poder y tenemos los números. ¿Qué hubo?
Okay, so let's take a super quick coffee break and then we'll come back and keep talking about this because it's like so juicy and so important.
Sabrosura pa' tu que.
Okay, Sylvia, what are you drinking?
Don't laugh. I'm drinking Theraflu.
Theraflu. Are you not feeling well?
I have been having como I got sick, I've been sick for a little while, for a minute, y todavía ando con mucho congestion, todavía traigo congestion, pero normalmente me tomo mis dos cafés en la mañana y luego me hago un té de canela y a veces de manzanilla dependiendo de mi mood, pero cuando ya the mood, te puedo decir que cuando empieza el frío, a mí el té de canela, así sencillito,
Sí, me
fresco.
imagino.
Y luego la casa huele riquísimo todo. No. Es como una de mis cosas favoritas de las temporadas ya de más frío. Y mi abuelita, en México, porque sí crecí en México hasta los 6 años, mi abuelita siempre en las mañanas me hacía, porque yo obviamente no podía tomar café, pero parte del ritual, I think, to include me in it, ella me hacía siempre mi té de canela y me decía, hija, ¿estás lista para tu canelita? And that's how I would wake up in the morning. So I actually often, as I drink my canelita, think about my grandmother.
I love that. The nostalgia.
Sí.
Bueno, yo on my end, yeah, I'm drinking a latte. So I finally, after 8 years, I got myself a proper espresso machine.
Wow.
And yeah. And I mean, it's a home machine. It's nothing like a, Marcelo. But it's, so I make myself, because, I've been dealing with like my fibroids and whatever. And so I've been making myself turmeric lattes. So it's a double espresso shot. I add turmeric for anti-inflammatory properties. I add honey.
Qué rico.
And y me hago un latte. And that's like my morning.
Ay, that sounds good. I might try that. Me encanta.
It's really good. And it's like, según yo, me ayuda. I mean, probably like, not enough. But, placebo.
Ay.
Okay, let's go back to the show.
Sabrosura pa' tu que.
Bueno, Sylvia. So something that came up as you were sharing earlier is also you mentioned the single issue voters. And I thought about my Cuban friend in college. And she was from immigrant Cuban parents.
Sí.
Grew up in Florida. It's pretty stereotypical, but it's typical. And I remember I went to an Obama rally and she was like, I can't do that because I was in college. And so I went to Iowa literally because I went to college in Missouri and I went to Iowa to watch him. And I was like, come on, let's go. And he's going to be the first Black president, like all the things. And she's like, I mean, it's cool. And I can get behind it. And this is a college student at the time, right? And she was like, I can get behind the idea and it sounds really cool. But as a Cuban American, I cannot do that because I'm a Republican through and through just because I'm a Cuban American, and I was like, what? And so it just kind of we ended up having a really interesting conversation where she was like, if I was to vote for Obama, it would be a traición for my family.
It's so wild. But I mean, listen, they have such a unique and rich story and history. There's a lot of trauma there.
For sure.
And I have a lot of empathy I do. For all of my Cuban and Venezolano brothers and sisters. I really do. Yeah, I really do. Like, I get it. But I think that the party's been hijacked.
For sure.
When you think about the Republican Party of Reagan, which is the party that they would ideal, like that's the vision that
Right.
the parents of this friend of yours had.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Reagan would vote for Trump? Do you think that he, like, no, no. The party has been hijacked. The party that we remember is not the same party. It's not Lincoln's party and it's not Reagan's party. Donald Trump's party is something different altogether, and it's dangerous. And I as much as I understand and respect the trauma that has guided so much of that has fueled and fostered so much loyalty to this party, I would really encourage and, with respect and love, request that all of my Cuban and Venezolano brothers and sisters think strongly about what this party is now, what it stands for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only what they say, but it's what they do. And if those values, and ask the hard question, are those values the values that my family and I stand for? And I invite you to question that and to really look with una lupa, porque lo que estamos hablando es alguien, I mean, January 6th. Really?
Yeah.
Like, este señor está diciendo que quiere que si votas esta vez, nunca más tienes que votar. ¿Qué está diciendo? Entre comillas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Entre comillas, ¿qué te está diciendo? Does that sound like a president or a dictator?
So many things between the lines.
So many things between the lines. And democracy cannot be taken for granted. And I will always have respect and sympathy for the experiences that have shaped us, because each of us is a product of our upbringing, our experiences. Punto.
Mm-hmm.
But again, do your research. Stay informed. Don't believe opinions. Opinions are not news. Opinions are not facts. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot that's wrong with, this is a whole nother podcast, but there's a lot that I am not, looking at how media has evolved as someone that remembers a very different landscape. And it's very sad, because if you think about it, the role of media in a democracy is so critical. It's so important that it's the only job/profession protected by the Constitution.
Yeah.
And yet, we've created
Still manipulated.
dark money coming from one place, both sides,
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of craziness that is disgusting. And that it just makes it so that people don't know what to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they can, and if you don't use facts, and if journalism is now opinion, we are destroying our democracy from the inside out.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying, and it's so sad. It's so sad. And it's happening on both sides. And this is why people feel they can't even trust their, like, what is truth? We're all living in bubbles now. algorithms are running our
Mm-hmm.
like our content. Now our content is coming to us. We don't seek the content. I heard a podcast too, or it was a journal. It was a journalist. It was a very short article. Young people don't read anymore.
They don't.
Universities are cutting classes and the amount of reading that they're assigning because who's going to get through the Iliad in 2024? Madness. Imagine that.
Like, it's wild. I actually saw a video from one of my friends who's a professor, and I didn't watch the whole video, but she was quoting an article that mentioned several Ivy League students, like Cornell University, Stanford, like big universities, who claim to have never been assigned to read a full book.
Yeah.
And they had never read a full book from front to back.
Qué triste. No, es algo que de veras asusta cuando te pones a pensar how much this is changing. The way that our brains process information
Mm-hmm.
is changing, and journalism doesn't have the same standards that it used to. Like I remember when I was working and started in the industry at Town and Country. And Town and Country wasn't the New York Times or
Yeah.
or like a major newspaper, because now people will say things about the New York Times. Anyway, I still think their journalism is incredible. But my point being that I was working at Hearst, and I remember the fact checking that would take place for things like whether or not good housekeeping would give a seal of approval to a brand.
Wow.
They would have an entire protocol. There was a testing that would take place. They would invite people to several different perspectives to try it. And even at Town and Country, which was a magazine that's a lifestyle magazine, I recall the amount, like, you couldn't just say something. It would have to be vetted. And it would be vetted by several editors and experts before it could be printed. Now,
anyone can write.
anyone can write, and we're all our own publishers,
Or AI can write.
or AI can write. I mean, it's wild, right? Generative about AI is now going to be telling us what's real and what's not. Imagine that. And never mind the hallucinations, and never mind. It's and that's not to say that I don't believe in evolution in that way. I do. I'm open to it. I just think it needs to be regulated, and we need to go back to a place where, like, I'll just share this. I mean, I grew up on the business side always. I would say I'm a frustrated creative because I actually love to write and I enjoy the creative process so much. But I was afraid it wasn't going to make me any money. So, of course, I went into the business side of the house. And what I can tell you is that I look at the way that I worked with so many incredible brands like Vox Media with a V, Vox V.
Yeah.
Please, everybody remember that. Eso me da un trauma eso. Vox with a V. And they're incredible brands. I worked at Hearst. I worked at Time Inc. I had the opportunity to work at Condé Nast. The brands that I spent years building and working for and with, the way that we treated advertisers, like if an advertiser ever paid for something, we never pretended that it didn't. You would say sponsored, powered, like there was real church and state, and we kept integrity for the purposes of maintaining a brand that people could believe in.
Right.
I don't feel like that is the case at all anymore.
Yeah.
And And I'm talking about on the ad side. I'm not even touching
The content. Yeah. There's so much
so
behind the
much.
scenes that we don't see. The transparency has not been upkept.
No, I mean, I read, I think Fox News has been detrimental to our society. Like,
Mm.
I'm convinced, and I think a lot about, like, right now, Fox News, right before the election, just announced that they're going to be um, launching Fox News en español.
Qué conveniente.
Qué conveniente. Yeah. So, and again, there's a part of me, it's like I'm not sitting here. I I realize that this is a very big topic. My point is, it's just sad that we live in a world where facts no longer matter. That's it. Like, I think it's a lot harder for us to be properly informed. Um and I think I go out of my way a lot to read The Guardian, to read BBC, to see El País, and, like, a lot of the international
Mhm.
newspapers, because I want to see how they're covering
It brings so much different perspective.
so much clarity.
Yeah, big time. I do that too because I'm like, how does it work? And I often, because todavía tengo familia en Mexico, they often like tell me how things are being perceived, and I'm like, oh
Sí,
my gosh.
sí, completamente otra historia. And it's crazy because depending on who you're talking to and what they consume from a content perspective, it's like a parallel universe.
Mhm.
It's like we're not even living in the same country.
Right. It's wild.
It's wild and sad.
Yes, and I think so another fact that I read that was very kinda like opened my eyes. So, bueno, primero, we live in multi-generational households. So
Sí.
Latinos are,
Ujú.
like, known for that,
Sí.
which
Ujú.
means that we have access to our people, literally, you just have to go outside of your room to the next room, and you can have conversations, it's not like you have to
Ujú.
pick up the phone and, like, make a slideshow and, like, literally, you can sit at the table and talk, and so I think the invitation that we're giving people is explore like, just have those conversations, and so 33% of Latino eligible voters are 50% are ages 50 and older,
Mm.
compared to 48% of all US eligible voters, which means that
Wow.
we are young. Like,
Mhm. Yes. Mhm.
from a demographic standpoint, we are very
Yeah.
young.
Yeah.
And what that makes me kinda, like, think about is those conversations, how they're so needed, because we have the multi-generational beliefs and stories from the parents that came at a certain point, and they might have that perspective of the party.
Yeah.
And then we have, like, the millennial generation and even the Gen Zs that can vote. And so everyone has different perspectives, and I think it's great for us to live in those multi-generational households so we can have those conversations. And how, we're quick to, like, make the carne asada. Let's, like, make a carne asada and then, like, talk about who are we voting for.
And it's funny because you'd be surprised. I mean, I think one of the scariest things has been uncovering the who's really voting for who. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yes, we have to have those conversations, and we have to keep them, you know, front and center and civilized and kind, and remember that at the end of the day, somos familia. We can agree to disagree, but we do need to have honest conversations so that we can test our own assumptions.
Totally.
We can stay informed. We can, I welcome every opportunity that I get to have and engage in essentially fact checking a lot of what's
Yeah.
said, right? I had this happen to me yesterday. And at the end of the conversation, which did get a little heated, I said, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that that we engaged in this conversation and that you shared your perspective and that I was able to share mine. And whatever you decide to do, that's the beauty of this country, that it's your right, your opinion, and your vote. And in the same way, my right, my opinion, and my vote. Right. So,
Totally.
which, brings me to, as you're thinking about your vote, make sure that you've confirmed your registration, because there have been a lot of issues, and it's critical. Like, make sure that you are registered and that your info is current and accurate. Like, don't take that for granted. It's a super simple step. You can do it online for 2 seconds. And many states, have websites where you can do this in like 3 clicks. Know your choices. Like, know if you can vote by mail or early voting. Have your voting plan. Bring your familia along, make it a thing, and then have a big carne asada, but definitely, because I did like that. I think we're quick for that, and we love that. And that's also part of what's beautiful about us. Pero see, and stay informed. Know the difference between an opinion and a fact. Ask who's behind the content, who's creating the content. Just process that.
Totally. And just like we talked about how anyone can create content, that also gives us a lot of access.
Yes.
Because I've witnessed conversations, and I've been part of them as well, where people only bring like the one thing that they heard from one TikTok, like
Yep.
like, and I'm like, so who's that person?
Exactly.
Did you fact check that person? Like, just because they thought about, like, what? And now, like, discernment. Use your discernment, because it makes me think about, I don't know if you saw, like, the recent Salma Hayek and Nicole Kidman, like, she pushed her or something. I don't know.
I know. Salma?
I don't know.
That sounds off.
Well, you only see the one clip when one is telling the other, like, don't touch me.
I know.
And then the other one's like, oh, that's fine. Just go. But then you see, like, if you look into it, then there's a picture when they're both smiling. So I don't know what the story is.
Well, that's the thing, that the clever editing is clever editing is a thing. And again, it's like staying informed is harder than it used to be, but that's why it's important to have various sources and like be careful what you share and what you repeat. Like, social media is a double-edged sword, because for sure it's where the majority of our communities are engaging, like, sin duda. That's the bottom line. It's our megaphone, and it's also the place where misinformation thrives. And so I think it's so important that we are, like, if you see something that's inaccurate, like, call it out. And
totally.
Where I see this a lot, and it makes me really sad. Like, my older tias and tios and like my grandparents on Facebook, and I'm just like, I know. And so, I think engage in those conversations, engage in those. And when they send you something, and my brother is really funny this way. He's very, le encanta, es mi mamá le llama el sermón, porque he's like, you should have been a priest, porque but he's wonderful. And I love you, Jerry. But he cracks me up, because he's the kind where if somebody in the family sends him something off, he will be quick to be like, this is misinformation.
Yes.
This is everything you need to know. Don't fall for it.
Yes.
And good on you, Jerry. We need more Jerrys in the world, to do that.
100%. And that's why I bring up the point of us being in multi-generational households, because the WhatsApp forwards and the Facebook videos that people just like
see
quick to share, the older generation, they're quick to share.
Sí,
And they may not have the resources, the tools, the knowledge, the
sí.
skill to fact check that. But then you have the younger people, the Jerrys, who
Mm-hmm.
are like, hold on a second. Let me actually
Yeah.
question this before I like respond to it.
Yes.
And let me tell you why this isn't true. So it's not like I said le gusta pelear, pero it's not necessarily that we're peleoneros, but like like back it up. Like bring the receipts.
Misinformation is dangerous. It's
Mm-hmm.
dangerous. And again, it's a way to erode our democracy. If you can't if you don't know what to believe,
Mm,
you'll believe anything.
right. It's whatever first video shows up.
Exacto. So, Takanijo is crazy out there.
It's crazy out there, but stay informed. Make sure you're registered if you can.
Sí,
For those of you who don't have the ability to vote, still stay informed and use your knowledge to also inform others, I think.
exacto. And I mean, I'll just sort of, end on this note because I know we're getting at time. I just, human dignity is our birthright. We are all in this together. This is not there's no other. That's an illusion. And any crime that we commit against another is a crime against our collective humanity.
Yeah.
Um, we all need each other. We're all dependent on each other. And until we wake up to that reality, we will lack the evolution necessary to make Earth a better place to live. And I believe that we all have it in us, within us, to build a better world and to live a life where we can choose to make this earth a heaven or a hell.
Yes.
We're not separate beings. We're we're all connected. Um entonces, just wake up to that, and the sooner that you do, and I know that I'm saying words that might sound really like out there, but if you ever just stop and close your eyes and think about that with an open heart, you become very aware that we're all the same. We all want the same things. We all have the same needs. We're all sentient beings, um, living a reality that we create together,
And we can shift.
that we can shift. And for the sake of our own evolution and for the sake of humanity, I really hope that we all wake up to that sooner rather than later. We are one.
Yes. November 4th, everyone.
If not sooner, si pueden hasta antes.
Yes. Si pueden desde ahorita. I think I don't think I got my ballot yet, but I think it's coming.
Yeah, good.
Give yourself time también, porque this is a big election. And so it's not just one like
No.
checkbox that you're like, give yourself
Mm-mm.
time to go through all of the things that you have a say on because they're important. Well,
Yes.
Sylvia, thank you so much for coming to Café con Pam and inspiring us to take action and use our power.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me and for, again, your service to our community by always telling more stories.
No, gracias a ti.
Sabrosura pa' ti que que.
All right, listeners. Well, that was my conversation with Sylvia. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it puts some things into perspective. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is the invitation to not be single issue focused. I think this election is crucial. I think this election is one that can shift a lot of things moving forward. And so thinking that we perhaps may have in the past focused on only like, oh, well, this matters to me. So I'm going to go with a candidate that addresses this thing. This is one election that needs to be a 360 view. We need to know, understand, remember, research, fact check, all of the issues that not only can affect us, but can affect others, because it's so important. And so I hope this resonates with you. If perhaps this might be a conversation that might be difficult for you to have with your family, you can send them this episode. We'll do it for you. And maybe that could spark some openness and dialogue, because humans understand humans when we actually converse, not when we just talk to talk. We want to have a dialogue, an understanding. We want to listen to each other. And so that's what's important. So I hope you take the time to do so. Do your research. Please go vote. We switched the schedule so we could release this episode earlier before it was planned, because this is that important. And so we wanted you to listen to this and then have enough time to go through all of the things. I actually got my ballot yesterday. Here is voter information pamphlet. And as you can see, this is not something you want to open and read as you're on your way to the voting polls. You want to take some time. You want to do your research. You want to research your candidates thoroughly, because it matters. And I would argue that it's not just your presidential candidates. There's also other candidates you may want to research that may inform also your decision. Take some time. You deserve it. We deserve to live a good democratic life where we'll thrive. You want to, listeners, if this is your first time here, this is an unusual episode, not typical to Café con Pam. However, welcome. I hope you stay. Hit the subscribe button, hit the follow, all of the things, so that you are aware and you get notifications when new episodes drop. Now, good thing is that you don't have to download the episode anymore. It used to be back in the day. We don't have to do that. We can stream it now, which is very cool. So you can either do it on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever other podcasting player platform. There's so many. There's so many podcast platforms. And so whichever one you use, make sure to subscribe, so that counts as our numbers, and it helps us. It helps the algorithm. Podcasting also has an algorithm, everyone. And so the more you like, the more you follow, the more you leave stars, ratings, reviews, the more the algorithm picks up that momentum and shares with others, recommends us with others. I do want to give a shout out to Apple Podcasts for featuring us in their Hispanic Latine Heritage Month space. For Latina Heritage Month, Apple Podcast made a compilation of podcasts. I am so honored to be amongst a really powerful list, and they call it Unidos, a celebration of stories, dreams, and community. And you can find Café con Pam under Together We Go Far category, and you can find other podcasts that are really cool as well. So I'm glad to be seen, recognized, and supported by the platforms is really cool. And for you, if you want to support us, you can very simply drop a rating, drop a review, push some stars. That helps a ton. If you have extra time and bandwidth, we appreciate your words, especially on Apple Podcasts. That counts a ton when you leave an actual review. And it can be short. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Where you can share your thoughts, whether on this episode or overall, and help your amigas, amigos, amigues, tías, primas, primos, everyone who is looking to find a podcast like Café con Pam. Wanna, listeners, let's stay connected at Café con Pam Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, cafeconpam.com to find out about all the things that we are doing. Thank you so much for those of you who came to Café con Pam live experience. This is the prequel to it. So I'm recording this before the event, but this episode releases day of the event. And make sure you tune into social media so you can check out the highlights online before we release the full episode from that event. So thank you so much for supporting and being here. And bueno, nos vemos para la próxima. Como siempre, stay shining.
Sabrosura pa' ti que